The rain was relentless that night, pounding against the tin roof of the old farmhouse as if the sky itself was trying to tear through. Darkness wrapped the land in an unyielding shroud, only broken by flashes of lightning that illuminated the fields in brief, jagged bursts. Inside, Sarah sat by the fireplace, her hands trembling as she stared at the flickering shadows dancing on the walls. The storm had been raging for hours, and the wind howled like a beast trapped in the distant hills. She knew, somehow, that this storm was no ordinary night. Suddenly, her phone vibrated violently on the table, pulling her out of her restless thoughts. The screen lit up with a number she didn't recognize. An unfamiliar, urgent call in the middle of the storm. Her heart pounded as she hesitated, then answered, her voice barely a whisper over the crackling static. "Hello." There was a pause on the other end, then a gravelly voice, strained and desperate. "Ma'am, we're stranded out here. 10 of us cowboys lost in the storm. Our wagons broke and we're miles from anywhere. We're hurt, cold, and running out of time. Please, can you help us?" The weight of those words hit her like a punch to the chest. 10 men, hurt and stranded in the raging night, with no way out. Sarah's mind raced. The farmhouse was old but sturdy, and she knew her land well. She had no idea how they managed to find her number, but she knew she couldn't turn them away. Not now. Without a second thought, she grabbed her oil lantern, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and resolve. She threw open the old barn doors, grabbed a thick blanket, and hurried into the storm. The wind battered her as she made her way across the muddy field, lightning illuminating the path like a ghostly guide. She could hear their voices, rough, tired, trembling, calling out in the darkness. When she finally reached them, she saw the group huddled together, shivering and exhausted. Their faces were streaked with dirt and rain, but gratitude shone in their eyes. She helped them into the farmhouse, easing their pain and comforting them with warm blankets and hot coffee she had hurriedly prepared. As she tended to their wounds, she couldn't shake the feeling that this night was more than just a rescue. It was a crossing point, a moment where everything she knew was about to change. As dawn broke, the storm finally subsided, and the sky revealed a pale, hopeful light. The cowboys, now rested and warmer, prepared to leave, promising to repay her kindness. But Sarah felt an inexplicable sense that the storm had brought more than just relief. It had brought something miraculous. The next day, as the sun cast golden rays over the land, Sarah was tending her garden when she noticed something strange in the distance. A faint shimmer, almost like a mirage, hovered over the fields where the storm had passed. Curious, she approached cautiously, her eyes widening in disbelief. There, in the middle of her fields, was a small, glowing object, no larger than a melon but radiating a gentle, otherworldly light. She reached out hesitantly, her fingers trembling as she touched it. A warm hum coursed through her, filling her with a sense of peace and wonder she had never known before. Suddenly, the memory of the cowboys and their suffering flooded her mind. She remembered their pain, their exhaustion, their hope, and somehow, she understood that what she was holding was a gift, a miracle born from the storm, a symbol of hope and renewal. Within moments, the glow intensified, and then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, it vanished. The field was silent once more, but Sarah knew, deep down, that something had changed forever. The storm had not only brought strangers to her door, it had awakened a miracle, one that would ripple through her life and the land she loved. She looked toward the horizon, a new sense of purpose filling her heart. The storm had passed, but the miracle had just begun, and she was ready to face whatever came next, knowing that sometimes the greatest gifts come when you least expect them. From the storm, from strangers, and from the very heart of hope itself. Sarah stood quietly in the early morning light, her hands gently resting on the weathered wood of the farmhouse porch. The storm had passed, leaving behind a calm that felt almost sacred after the chaos of the night. Yet, beneath her calm exterior, her heart was heavy with a weight that had never truly left her, one that shaped every choice she made. She had made a vow long ago, one she carried with her like a sacred oath, passed down through generations of her family. It was a promise to her father, a man who had always believed in the power of kindness and the importance of honoring those in need, no matter the cost. Years before, her father had fallen ill, his body weakened by sickness and hardship. Despite their limited means, Sarah remembered how he had always spoken of duty, how he had given his last piece of bread to a hungry stranger, how he had risked his safety to help someone in need. When he was gone, Sarah had promised herself she would uphold that same spirit. She would never turn someone away, no matter the danger or the sacrifice. That promise had become her moral compass, guiding her through every storm, literal and metaphorical, that life threw her way. That vow was the reason she had opened her door to the 10 battered, exhausted Cowboys the night before. She saw in them the reflection of her father's kindness, the same desperate struggle, the same unspoken hope. She knew what it was like to feel helpless, to need shelter when the world seemed cold and unforgiving. Her heart had swelled with compassion, but also with a deeper understanding, an unbreakable bond rooted in the memory of her father's sacrifice. She was doing what he would have done, what she had sworn she would do. As she watched the sunrise, her thoughts drifted to the night they had shared. The Cowboys, rough and weary, had looked to her as if she held some sacred power, not just to keep them safe, but to restore their shattered spirits. Their gratitude was palpable, but to Sarah, it was more than that. It was a reaffirmation of her vow, a reminder that her duty extended beyond mere kindness. It was a sacred obligation, an unbreakable promise she had made to honor her father's memory and to keep alive the spirit of compassion he had imbued in her. She remembered how her father had always said, "In a world that often forgets the value of human connection, it's the small acts of mercy that shape the future." Those words echoed in her mind now, fueling her resolve. Her act of sheltering the Cowboys was not just an act of charity. It was a sacred act rooted in love, duty, and remembrance. It was a bridge connecting her past and her present, a promise to uphold the legacy of kindness her father had entrusted to her. And now, standing in the quiet dawn, she felt the profound truth of that vow. It was what drove her to give everything, her time, her home, her heart, to strangers in need, because she knew, deep in her soul, that the true measure of a person's character was how they responded to suffering, how they honored their commitments, and how they carried forward the sacred promises that defined their lives. Her eyes welled with quiet tears as she looked toward the fields, where the miracle the Cowboys had promised was about to unfold. She had no doubt that her vow had summoned something greater, something divine. It was a testament to the unbreakable bond she held with her father's memory, a bond that gave her strength to face whatever future hardships might come. In that moment, she understood that her purpose was more than just survival or morality. It was a sacred duty to keep alive the love and compassion her father had shown her. That vow, made in the quiet of her heart, was the foundation of everything she stood for. It was her moral anchor, her unbreakable promise, to honor the past, to serve those in need, and to believe in the miracles born from acts of genuine kindness. And as the sun climbed higher, casting golden light over the land, Sarah felt a renewed sense of purpose. Her vow had become her heart's compass, guiding her through the storms of life, both the raging weather outside and the quiet struggles within. She was ready, knowing that her unbreakable promise was the greatest gift she could offer. To herself, her family's legacy, and the world she was determined to make better. The old garage was silent except for the faint hum of a lonely wind sneaking through the cracked windows. Dust motes floated lazily in the shafts of morning light that seeped in, casting long, ghostly shadows across the battered tools and faded posters on the wall. In the corner, a battered workbench bore the weight of years of neglect. Scratched, scarred, like the man who sat hunched nearby, staring at an old photograph clutched tightly in his trembling hands. His name was Jack, and the weight of his past pressed down on him like the rusted steel slabs that lined the floor. The photograph was worn and faded, a snapshot of a younger version of himself, smiling beside a woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. His wife long gone. Her face was a bomb and a dagger all at once. Every line and crack in the photo seemed to mirror the jagged scars on his soul, remnants of choices made, of battles lost and won, of grief buried deep beneath layers of hardened resolve. Jack's eyes, once bright and full of hope, had dulled over the years, clouded by regret and sorrow. His hands, calloused from years of hard labor, trembled as he traced the edges of the picture, the memories flooding back like a storm he couldn't outrun. He remembered the days when life was full of promise, when love was a certainty, when the world still held meaning beyond the endless stretches of desert and dirt. But that world had shattered long ago. His wife had died in a fire that he still blamed himself for, an accident, they said, but to him it was his failure. He had been away, chasing a fleeting dream of prosperity, leaving her alone that night. The flames had consumed her, and in the aftermath, all that remained was a hollow shell of guilt. The scars on his hands weren't just from physical toil. They were symbols of a burden he carried every day, every hour. The scratches on his arms, the burn mark on his shoulder from a long-ago accident, all reminders of his past failures and the pain he had buried deep inside. His eyes drifted to a small, rusted medal on a chain around his neck, a token of a time when he'd fought for something greater, a symbol of his service and sacrifice. It was a relic now, just like him, worn and forgotten, but still holding memories of courage and duty. Jack's gaze lowered to the dusty floor, where faint footprints led toward the door, a reminder of the night he had taken in the storm-wrecked Cowboys, seeking refuge and redemption. He had given shelter to strangers, knowing what it was like to feel lost and broken himself. And yet, despite his own suffering, he had opened his heart, an act that felt both brave and foolish in equal measure. As he sat there, a single tear slipped down his weathered cheek, catching the sunlight and shimmering like a tiny, fleeting miracle. He wondered if the storm that brought those men to his door had also stirred something in him, something he'd buried for so long he no longer remembered what it felt like to hope. The desert outside was barren and unforgiving, a mirror to his own internal wasteland. The silence was deafening, a reflection of his loneliness, of a life that had once been full of love and purpose, but now was haunted by ghosts and memories. The scars on his hands and the photographs in his grasp told stories he was too tired to tell aloud. Stories of love lost, of battles fought within himself, of the broken pieces of a life he once believed in. Yet, beneath the layers of pain and regret, a faint ember of humanity flickered, an unspoken desire for forgiveness, for healing, for a second chance. Jack knew that what he was doing, this quiet act of kindness, was more than just a gesture. It was a quiet rebellion against the guilt that threatened to consume him. It was a reminder that even in the depths of despair, there was still a chance for redemption, that perhaps, in helping others find shelter, he might find a way to mend his own shattered soul. As the morning sun climbed higher, casting light on the dust and scars, Jack closed his eyes and whispered a silent prayer, for forgiveness, for peace, for the strength to face another day. The desert outside remained as empty as his heart once was, yet somehow within that emptiness, he sensed a fragile hope, an invitation to begin again. His past was etched into his skin, into the photographs and medals that adorned his space. But his future, fragile and uncertain, still held the promise of grace, of healing. And in that quiet, sacred space, Jack allowed himself to believe that even broken things could be mended, that scars could someday fade, and that perhaps, somewhere beyond the horizon, redemption awaited. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a soft golden glow over the horizon, when the hero reached for his old, battered radio. The device crackled to life with a familiar hum, and he knew it was time to call in his allies, each one a piece of the strength they needed to face whatever darkness was coming. His voice, steady yet tinged with urgency, broke through the static as he began to speak. First, he called Liam, his oldest friend, a rugged former soldier with a soldier's discipline and unwavering loyalty. Liam's voice was calm, gravelly but confident, carrying the weight of years of service and sacrifice. "Liam here. I heard you. Count on me. I'll be there by dawn." His reputation for loyalty was unbreakable, and his presence alone was enough to remind everyone that true allegiance didn't waver. Next, he reached out to Maria, a fierce woman who'd fought her own battles and emerged stronger. Her voice, sharp and unwavering, echoed through the radio waves. "You can count on me. I've got your back. Always." Maria's courage was her shield, unflinching and fierce, ready to face any injustice head-on, no matter how daunting. Her fiery spirit ignited hope in the darkest moments. Then he called Jake, an outsider, a drifter with a past he tried to leave behind. His voice was rough, carrying the weight of regret and redemption. "Hey, I don't know what's coming, but I'm in. No one fights alone if I can help it." Jake had walked through fire and come out with scars, but it was his redemption that made him a vital part of this fight. A reminder that even the lost could find their way back when given a chance. The hero's next call was to Marcus, an old biker with a warm smile and a heart as big as the open road. Marcus's voice crackled with mirth and wisdom. "You got me, brother. I'll ride through hell for this. We're in this together. No matter what comes, we stand united." His loyalty to friends and his unwavering sense of justice made him a cornerstone in their fight. Finally, he reached out to Sarah, a quiet healer whose calm presence had saved many lives. Her voice was gentle but firm. "I'll be there. Healing and strength go hand in hand. Let's bring hope where there's despair." Her wisdom was a guiding light, reminding everyone that true strength also meant compassion and understanding. As each ally confirmed their commitment, the hero felt a surge of unity, an unbreakable bond forged through shared values and a collective resolve to stand against injustice. These individuals, each embodying loyalty, courage, redemption, wisdom, and compassion, represented the best of what humanity could be when faced with darkness. They weren't just allies. They were a family, chosen not by blood, but by their unwavering principles and the courage to fight for what's right. The hero looked out over the rising sun, knowing that together, they formed a shield strong enough to face whatever storm was coming. Their stories, their sacrifices, and their values intertwined, creating a tapestry of hope and resilience. As the radio crackled one last time with affirmation, their voices united in purpose, the hero felt a renewed sense of strength. The battle ahead would be fierce, but with these allies by his side, he knew they could face anything. Because at the core of their unity was something unbreakable. The human spirit, fueled by loyalty, courage, redemption, wisdom, and hope. And nothing, no injustice, no storm, could tear that apart. The dawn broke slowly, casting a muted, pale light across the empty highway that stretched out before them. The storm had finally receded, leaving behind a sky tinged with soft pinks and trembling clouds that seemed to hold their breath. As the group mounted their horses and trucks, a sense of quiet anticipation settled over them, like the calm before a storm that had already passed. The journey ahead was both literal, driving toward the land of the farmer's wife, and symbolic, a pilgrimage through their own pasts, fears, and hopes. The road was long, winding through open fields that shimmered with dew, each mile a step into the unknown. The landscape was wild and unforgiving, much like the storm that had brought them together, and the memories of that night flickered in their minds. For some, it was the storm itself, how it had howled like a beast, tearing at the sky, threatening to drown everything in chaos. For others, it was the promise made in the darkness, a vow to help, to protect, to do what was right no matter the cost. Every gust of wind, every crack of thunder, seemed to echo that unspoken pledge. As they rode, their thoughts drifted like clouds across the vast sky. Jack remembered his wife's gentle smile, how she used to say that even the darkest night would pass, that dawn always came eventually. Liam thought of the soldiers he had fought beside, of brotherhood forged in fire and blood, and how loyalty was the only thing that kept them going when hope seemed lost. Maria, fierce and unyielding, reflected on her own battles, fighting through pain and prejudice to stand tall for what she believed in. Marcus's mind wandered to the open roads he'd traveled, each mile a testament to freedom and resilience, and how sometimes the greatest strength lay in simply never giving up. The landscape mirrored their inner journey. Storm clouds loomed behind them, a reminder of the chaos they'd endured, but ahead, the sky was clearing, hinting at renewal. The highway, cutting through the wilderness like a scar across the earth, symbolized their crossing into a new chapter, one marked by sacrifice, hope, and the unbreakable bond of promises kept. The further they traveled, the more they understood that this was no mere physical journey, but a voyage into their own spirits, testing their resolve and reaffirming their commitments. The night gradually fell as they pressed on, stars emerging like distant beacons guiding them forward. The darkness was thick and weighty, almost suffocating, but within it, they found a strange comfort, an acknowledgement that sometimes true clarity only comes when shadows fall deep. Memories of the storm's fury haunted them, yet it was in the stillness of the night that they felt the most alive, the most connected to the promise that had brought them here. They thought of the farmer's wife, sheltering the strangers in her time of need, her act of kindness a mirror of their own sacrifices. The storm had tested them, but it had also revealed their true selves, resilient, compassionate, and unyielding. As dawn approached once more, the landscape slowly shifted. The horizon blushed with the promise of new beginnings, and they knew that their journey was nearing its culmination. The terrain grew softer, greener, as if the land itself was welcoming them home. Questions and doubts that had haunted them in the night faded in the face of the rising sun, each mile a testament to the promise they had made in the storm's shadow, a vow etched into their souls. They carried with them more than supplies or memories. They carried the weight of their integrity, the price paid for keeping their word, and the hope that their sacrifice would bring something greater than they could see now. By the time they reached the farm, the air was thick with expectation. The land was quiet, waiting, as if holding its breath for what was to come. Their hearts pounded with anticipation, knowing that the true journey, the one within, had been just as arduous as the ride itself. They had faced storms both outside and within, and the cost had been high. Yet, through it all, they had held onto a fragile yet unbreakable thread, the promise that had pulled them through darkness into the light. Now, standing at the threshold, they understood that this was more than a return. It was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, an affirmation that even the fiercest storms could be weathered when driven by hope, loyalty, and the courage to keep faith in one another. And as the first rays of sunlight spilled over the fields, they knew that they had already begun to witness the miracle they had promised to bring. As the dust settled and the last echoes of the storm faded into memory, the group approached the small town with a quiet resolve. Their horses moved steadily, barely disturbing the air around them, as if they carried not just their bodies, but the weight of what was to come. The morning sun cast a muted glow over the town's faded facades. An old courthouse, a weathered hospital, a handful of humble shops, each building holding stories of hardship and hope. But today, there was a different kind of story unfolding, one written heavily in silence and in the unspoken strength of those who had come to face the confrontation ahead. They arrived not with boisterous noise or hurried footsteps, but with a deliberate, almost military precision. The 10 cowboys, sturdy, weathered, and unyielding, moved together as a single entity, a dark wave of purpose cutting a steady path through the quiet streets. Their presence was striking. The way they formed a tight formation, shoulders squared and eyes forward, commanded attention without a word. Every step was measured, each man radiating a calm intensity that seemed to ripple through the air, silencing the usual chatter of the town. The townspeople watched from their porches and windows, some pausing mid-conversation, others clutching their children closer. The group's arrival was like a thunderclap in an otherwise peaceful day, an undeniable force of calm authority. Their boots echoed softly on the cracked pavement, a rhythmic reminder of the unspoken promise they carried. They did not shout or swagger. Instead, they moved with purpose, their silence more powerful than any words could be. In the center of the street, they paused briefly, surveying their surroundings with a steady, unwavering gaze. The courthouse, with its tall, looming columns, seemed to stand a little taller in their presence, as if recognizing the gravity of what was about to unfold. The hospital, usually a place of healing, now felt like a battleground, a symbol of hope and the fight for life. Every eye in the town was drawn to this formidable group, their stillness almost like a shield, a silent declaration that they were ready for whatever the day would bring. Their faces, rugged and lined with stories of hardships endured, carried an unspoken message: resilience. Their eyes, sharp and calm, held the weight of what they had left behind. The storm, the journey, the promise made in the darkness. Now those eyes looked forward, unwavering, as if they could see beyond the horizon, beyond the immediate conflict that awaited. It was a visual power, a quiet command that demanded respect without a single shout. The formation was deliberate, 5 on one side, 5 on the other, forming a barrier that felt both protective and intimidating. The air grew thick with anticipation, each breath drawn in slow and steady, every heartbeat echoing the silent rhythm of readiness. It was as if the town itself had been frozen in time, caught in the stillness that precedes a storm's fury, waiting for the inevitable clash. There was a palpable tension hanging in the air, a collective holding of breath, as if the very streets could sense the coming confrontation. The group's presence was more than just physical. It was visual poetry, a display of unwavering strength and unity that spoke louder than any words could. In that silent moment, the town's quiet peace was a fragile veneer, ready to shatter at the slightest spark. And yet, despite the impending conflict, there was an undeniable grace in their stance. They had come through storms of doubt, pain, and sacrifice to stand here now. Their formation was a testament to discipline, loyalty, and the unbreakable bond forged in hardship. The power of their silence conveyed a message. They were prepared to defend what mattered most, to face whatever darkness was lurking just beyond the horizon. As the group stood steadfast in the heart of the town, a quiet understanding settled over those watching. This was more than a confrontation. It was a moment of transformation. From journey to battlefield, from peace to impending chaos, the visual strength of these 10 men marked the beginning of something greater. A silent promise that, come what may, they would stand firm, united, unshaken, and face the storm head-on. The room was thick with silence, a heavy weight pressing down on everyone present. The dim lighting cast long shadows, accentuating the tense atmosphere. Standing at the center was the man with authority, the judge, a figure whose reputation had long been built on discipline and control. Today, his eyes gleamed with a mixture of confidence and condescension, knowing he held the power to shape lives with a single word. Opposite him, the hero, the quiet, steadfast man who carried the weight of justice not through violence, but through unwavering moral clarity. Their minds engaged in a silent duel, each one calculating the other's every move, every word, every unspoken motive. The judge's voice broke the silence first, smooth and commanding. You think you can come here, disrupt the order, and expect to walk away unchallenged? You're a fool if you believe morality alone can stand against authority. His words dripped with manipulation, designed to undermine, to sow doubt. But the hero held his ground, voice calm but resolute. Authority isn't a license to manipulate or to bend the truth. Justice isn't served by intimidation or moral corruption. It's served by standing firm in what's right, even when it's uncomfortable. The judge's lips curled into a faint smile, a look that masked a deeper calculation. You're naive. You see justice as some idealistic virtue, something that can be achieved without compromise. But life isn't black and white. It's messy. Sometimes, to do what's right, you have to bend the rules, manipulate a little, or even turn a blind eye. His words attempted to sway, to justify his moral corruption, an appeal to pragmatism that masked a darker intent. The hero responded with a steady gaze, voice unwavering. Bending the rules isn't justice. It's tyranny. And tyranny, no matter how polished, is still tyranny. His words cut through the room like a sharp blade, exposing the lie behind the judge's carefully crafted facade. The mental duel intensified as the judge tried to undermine the hero's integrity, weaving subtle insinuations about morality, about the hero's past, about what he might be willing to do for the greater good. But the hero stayed focused, his mind sharp, knowing what was at stake. It wasn't about winning a battle of words. It was about defending the very essence of justice against manipulation and moral decay. You think you can sway the law with empty threats and false morality, the hero said quietly, eyes locked on the judge's. But true justice isn't about control. It's about fairness, about standing up for what's right, even when nobody's watching. The judge's smirk faltered for a moment, revealing a flicker of doubt, but he quickly masked it with a calculated calm. You're risking everything, standing here, defying authority, he whispered, voice low but threatening. You're playing a dangerous game, believing your moral code can withstand the weight of real power. The hero's response was measured, yet unwavering. Power isn't about control or intimidation. It's about responsibility. And responsibility means doing what's right, whether it's popular or not, whether it benefits you or not. His words hung in the air, heavier than any physical blow, challenging the judge's moral corruption head-on. It was a battle of ethics, a duel of minds, each man trying to sway the other's conviction, each one testing the limits of their influence. The judge's eyes flickered with a mixture of anger and respect, finally realizing that this wasn't a foe easily manipulated or silenced. The hero's unwavering stance, grounded in integrity and truth, was a silent testament to the power of moral conviction. In that room, the true victory wasn't achieved through violence or coercion, but through the strength of ideas, the resilience of character, and the refusal to cross ethical boundaries. As they finally broke apart, the judge's facade cracked just enough to reveal the inner conflict, an acknowledgement that justice, rooted in morality, could never truly be silenced by intimidation. And the hero, knowing he had held firm, walked away with the quiet assurance that truth and integrity would always be the greatest weapons in the fight for justice. The room had been tense for what felt like an eternity, every eye fixed on the battered, weathered document that lay between them. It was an old, yellowed confession, an unassuming piece of paper that carried the weight of buried truth. The air was thick with anticipation, every breath a silent prayer that this fragile piece of evidence would finally crack open the carefully crafted mask of the villain and reveal the true story. Sarah held it in trembling hands, her fingers brushing against the ink that had faded with time, but whose message remained clear. A confession, a truth long hidden, that would change everything. It was a recording, a written testimony from someone who had witnessed the corruption firsthand. A voice from the past that refused to stay silent any longer. With a deep breath, she began to read aloud, her voice trembling at first but growing steadier with each word. I, Jonathan Carter, hereby confess to the crimes I committed under the guise of authority. I manipulated, coerced, and lied to cover my own greed and moral corruption. I used my position as judge to silence the innocent, to protect my own interests, and to hide the truth of my actions. The room fell into a stunned silence, the weight of the revelation sinking deep into every soul present. This wasn't just a confession. It was a detonating truth that shattered the illusion of justice that the villain had built around himself. It exposed the mask of authority as a facade of deception, a carefully maintained lie designed to silence the voice of the victim, to hide the moral rot festering beneath the surface. Sarah's voice cracked as she continued, reading the damning details of the crimes. How Jonathan Carter had falsified evidence, manipulated witnesses, and abused his power to serve his own dark interests. The truth was laid bare, undeniable now, like a light piercing through the darkness of his lies. And then a recording crackled to life. The faint, trembling voice of a woman, one of the victims, whose life had been shattered by his actions. Her words, raw and trembling with emotion, confirmed every detail. He told me I would be destroyed if I spoke out, that my family would suffer, that my voice didn't matter. But I refused to stay silent. I refused to let him get away with it anymore. The emotional explosion flooded the room, an outpouring of pain, anger, and finally vindication. Her voice, once silenced by fear, now rang clear and true, exposing the villain's mask of moral superiority as a hollow lie. The victim's courage ignited a moral fire in everyone present. The truth was no longer hidden behind veils of manipulation and control. It had surfaced raw and real, and with it came a sense of moral release, the moral clarity that justice had finally been served. The villain's carefully guarded image crumbled as the evidence laid bare his deepest secrets. The confession, the recording, the testimony, they were the keys that unlocked the chains of deception. The victim's voice was the clarion call that shattered the silence of injustice, revealing the moral rot that had festered for years. The revelation was an emotional crescendo, a moral explosion that swept through the room like a tidal wave of truth. In that moment, nothing could be hidden anymore. The victim's bravery had exposed the darkness lurking beneath the veneer of authority, and everyone knew that the real victory was in the truth finally setting them free. Justice wasn't served by silence or by turning a blind eye. It was served by courage, by unmasking the lies, and by standing unwavering in the face of corruption. As the room settled into a profound silence once more, Sarah looked at the faces around her, some filled with relief, others with tears, knowing that this revelation had changed everything. The buried truth had been uncovered, and with it, the moral universe had been restored. The villain's mask had fallen, and the victim's voice had become the catalyst for true justice. And in that moment, they all understood. Sometimes, it takes a single confession, a brave voice, to ignite the moral revolution that can finally bring darkness into the light. The town gathered quietly that evening, under a sky still tinged with the faint glow of the sunset. It was an unusual gathering, one born not of celebration, but of solemn truth finally coming to light. The evidence had been laid bare. The confession, the recording, the testimonies, all pointing to a single undeniable truth. Justice, in its purest form, was finally arriving, not through revenge, but through unwavering integrity and the courage of those who refused to stay silent. Sarah stood at the front of the crowd, her face calm yet resolute. She had given shelter to the 10 cowboys during the storm, a night of kindness that now seemed like a pivotal moment in the unfolding story of truth and morality. That night, amid the howling wind and pouring rain, she had looked into their tired, grateful eyes and seen a glimmer of hope, not just for herself, but for everyone who believed in what was right. Now, the evidence had surfaced, and the villain's mask was crumbling before their eyes. The man in question, Jonathan Carter, had once been revered as a pillar of the community. His fall from grace was swift and undeniable. His name, once spoken with respect, was now spoken with disapproval. As he stood before the gathering, the weight of the truth was evident in every line of his posture. His face, once confident and proud, now showed signs of shame and regret, though it was too late for apologies to undo the damage. The public revelation had stripped away his veneer of respectability. His crimes, manipulation, abuse of power, silencing the innocent, had been exposed with clarity and dignity. The community had demanded justice, not revenge, and the truth had answered that call. There was no room for anger that turned to violence. Instead, there was a profound sense of moral clarity. Liam, one of the cowboys who had been sheltered that stormy night, stepped forward. His voice was steady but filled with emotion. "Justice isn't about revenge," he said softly but firmly. "It's about truth, about integrity, about doing what's right even when it's difficult." Sarah showed us that last night when she risked everything to help those who needed it most. Today, we stand here with the truth on our side, and that's what matters most. The crowd nodded, some wiping away tears, others exchanging looks of relief. The moral victory was clear. The villain had fallen, not because of hatred or vengeance, but because the truth had refused to be silenced. The community had chosen to uphold integrity, and in doing so had restored their moral compass. Sarah's eyes glistened with quiet tears. She had given shelter amid the chaos, and now she saw that her small act of kindness had sparked something greater, a ripple of righteousness that could not be contained. Her actions, rooted in compassion, had become a symbol of unwavering moral strength. She had promised to do what was right, and she had kept that promise, even when it meant standing alone against darkness. As the crowd dispersed, the sense of dignity lingered. The truth had arrived like a gentle but persistent dawn, illuminating the darkness that had long shrouded their community. Justice was not a matter of vengeance but of restoring what was right, of giving voice to the silenced and holding accountable those who abused their power. The villain's fall was a testament to the power of honesty and moral courage. His mask had been torn away, revealing the true face of greed and corruption. Yet, even in his downfall, there was a dignity, a lesson that true justice is rooted in integrity, not spite, and that the moral strength of a community lies in its ability to stand firm in the truth. And as the distant stars began to emerge in the night sky, those gathered understood that this was more than just a story of justice. It was a testament to the human spirit, a reminder that, no matter how dark the night, honesty and righteousness will always find a way to shine through. The storm had passed, and with it, the darkness receded, replaced by the light of truth and the hope of a better, more just tomorrow. As dawn broke over the open plains, a gentle light spilled across the horizon, casting a warm, golden hue over the fields that had once seemed so dark and uncertain. The storm had passed, leaving behind a quiet calm that seemed to breathe new life into everything it touched. The small farmstead stood silent as the last of the cowboys quietly prepared to leave, their faces marked by a mixture of gratitude, resolve, and a quiet hope that hadn't been there before the storm. Jack, Liam, and the others mounted their horses, exchanging nods and silent promises, each one aware that this moment was more than just a departure. It was a testament to the power of kindness, truth, and moral courage. The hero, the one who had given shelter and stood for what was right, remained behind for a moment longer, watching as the figures of the Brotherhood disappeared into the distance. His heart was full, but he didn't need to say a word. His actions had already spoken volumes. With a gentle smile, he turned away, walking quietly back toward the farmhouse, knowing that his promise had been fulfilled. The victim, Sarah, watched from her porch, her face softened by a new sense of peace. The night of fear and darkness was behind her now. In its place, she saw the beginning of something new, an opportunity to rebuild, to heal, to embrace hope once more. The storm had tested her, but it had also revealed her strength. She took a deep breath, feeling the cool morning air fill her lungs, and stepped forward to begin her new chapter. Her journey was just beginning, and she was ready to walk it with courage and grace. As the last of the cowboys disappeared beyond the horizon, the scene shifted to a broader view, a sweeping landscape that stretched endlessly, symbolizing the open road ahead, full of possibility and renewal. The sky, painted in shades of amber and rose, seemed to whisper promises of a brighter tomorrow. Above, the stars began to emerge, twinkling softly as if in silent acknowledgement of the moral victory that had just unfolded. The night's darkness had given way to the dawn of hope. The storm's chaos had cleared to reveal a path forward, paved with integrity and compassion. And in this quiet moment, the landscape itself became a metaphor for renewal. A vast, open road leading into the future, illuminated by the fading light of sunset and the first glimmers of starlight. It was a visual reminder that even after the deepest pain and greatest upheaval, there is always a way forward, an endless journey of rebirth and hope. Somewhere in the distance, the silhouette of a lone figure on horseback moved slowly along the trail, small against the vastness but purposeful, embodying the silent promise that the road ahead is yours to travel, with all its twists and turns, its joys and challenges. The scene lingered there, in the gentle glow of the sunset and the emerging stars, inviting a moment of reflection. The story was not just about the storm or the fall of a villain or the triumph of justice. It was about the resilience of the human spirit, the capacity to heal, to forgive, and to begin anew. The hero's quiet departure symbolized the end of one chapter and the quiet hope of a new beginning. Sarah's new life was unfolding before her, rooted in courage and the knowledge that even in the darkest night, the promise of dawn remains eternal. The open road stretched endlessly ahead, a visual metaphor for hope, renewal, and the limitless possibilities that come after pain. As the stars shimmered softly above and the last light of sunset faded into night, the scene whispered of a future yet to be written, one filled with promise, resilience, and the quiet, unwavering hope that guides us always toward the dawn.